Before the famine began, most people living in Ireland, especially in rural areas, experienced extreme poverty. Many families lived in small cottages, survived on small plots of land, and depended heavily on whatever crops they could grow. By the mid-1800s, Ireland's population was incredibly high for its size, reaching between 8.1 and 8.5 million people. A major problem was that so many poor families were almost entirely dependent on potatoes. The potato was cheap, easy to grow, even on poor quality land, and provided enough nutrition to keep a family alive. But this heavy reliance meant that if anything happened to the potato crop, millions of people would have no backup source of food. This created a fragile situation that would soon turn into disaster. The Irish potato famine was caused by both natural forces and political decisions. The immediate trigger was a plant disease known as potato blight, caused by the fungus Phytophthora infestans. This fungus thrives in cool, wet conditions, exactly the weather Ireland experienced in the mid-1840s. When blight struck the potato fields in 1845, crops turned black, rotted underground, and became completely inedible. The blight returned again and again, devastating the potato harvest from 1845 all the way through 1852. But crop failure alone doesn't explain how such a massive crisis unfolded. The deeper causes came from socio-political problems. Ireland was under British control, and its economy was structured in a way that kept the Irish poor dependent on landlords and vulnerable to bad harvests. When the blight struck, British policies were slow and often ineffective. Instead of providing large-scale relief, the government hesitated, sticking to ideas like laissez-faire economics, which discouraged interference in the economy. There were also strong beliefs at the time that too much aid would make the poor dependent, which caused policymakers to hold back the help that was desperately needed. So while the blight destroyed the crops, it was the combination of political inaction, poverty, and inequality that turned crop failure into a full-scale humanitarian disaster. Once the potato crops began failing year after year, Ireland entered a period of catastrophic suffering. The population dropped 20 to 25% between 1841 and 1851, falling from over 8 million to around 6 million in only a decade. This is one of the largest population drops in a peaceful European country's history. At least 1 million people died from starvation or from diseases that spread rapidly among weakened populations. Starvation made people more vulnerable to illnesses like typhus, dysentery, and cholera, which swept through crowded communities. Workhouses, which were supposed to provide shelter and food, quickly became overcrowded and unsafe. Another 2 million people left Ireland entirely during the famine years. Families were torn apart as parents sent children overseas, hoping at least someone would survive. Many people walked miles to ports with nothing but the clothes they wore, leaving behind homes, land, and possessions. The Great Famine wasn't just a food shortage, it was a complete social collapse, fueled by poverty, hunger, disease, and the failure of systems meant to protect people in crisis. Between 1845 and 1855, over 1.5 million Irish people emigrated, creating one of the largest migration waves of the 19th century. For many families, leaving Ireland was the only possible way to survive, but the journey across the Atlantic was extremely dangerous. Large numbers of emigrants travelled on what became known as coffin ships. These vessels were overcrowded, poorly ventilated, and lacked proper food or sanitation. Diseases like typhus and cholera spread rapidly, and many passengers died before reaching their destination. Those who survived the voyage typically arrived in major port cities like Boston and New York. Most immigrants couldn't afford to travel farther inland, so Irish neighborhoods formed quickly in these cities. However, instead of being welcomed, Irish immigrants often faced harsh discrimination. Signs saying, "No Irish need apply" were common, and many people blamed Irish immigrants for poverty, crime, or job competition. Still, the Irish persevered. They worked in factories, built railroads, served in city labor forces, and played a major role in shaping American working-class life. Over time, Irish communities became stronger and more influential, eventually contributing significantly to American politics, culture, and religion. During the famine, Ireland was part of the United Kingdom, so responsibility for relief fell to the British government. At first, the government attempted some forms of assistance. They imported corn from the United States and tried to reduce its price so more people could afford food. But this corn was unfamiliar to Irish families, difficult to grind, and not nearly enough to feed millions of people. As time went on, the government shifted toward a laissez-faire approach. This meant that they believed the government should not interfere heavily in the economy, even during a crisis. Because of this mindset, officials stopped many relief programs, believing the market would correct itself. But Ireland's economy was already so fragile that without intervention, it simply collapsed further. The government also required that local Irish communities fund their own relief efforts through taxes. However, these communities were already impoverished and couldn't raise enough money to provide significant help. As a result, relief programs shut down, leaving hundreds of thousands without food or support. Historians widely agree that the government's response was inadequate, slow, and deeply influenced by prejudices about the Irish poor. Many lives that could have been saved were lost due to weak political action. The impact of the Irish potato famine was enormous and long-lasting. Ireland's population never fully recovered, and even today it remains below what it was before the famine. The mass emigration created a worldwide Irish diaspora, with millions of people around the world, especially in the United States, able to trace their family roots back to those who fled the famine. In America, Irish immigrants provided crucial labor during the country's industrial growth. They strengthened the Catholic population in many cities and helped shape American culture, traditions, and identity. Irish Americans played major roles in police forces, labor unions, politics, and city governments. Over time, Irish heritage became a celebrated and influential part of American society. The famine also left a powerful emotional legacy. It remains a symbol of suffering, resilience, and the importance of political responsibility. Today, the Irish potato famine is remembered as a turning point that shaped nations on both sides of the Atlantic.